Okay, imagine this. You are online, maybe you're checking your email, you're doing some shopping, you're reading a news story, and a familiar little box pops up. I'm not a robot. How many times have you clicked this before? Probably hundreds, if not thousands. But this time, it's asking you to do something a little different. Press a few keys, copy and paste a code, hit enter. But here's the thing, in just a few seconds, you have handed a complete stranger basically a doorway into your computer and all of the personal information that is on it. No flashing warning lights, no obvious scam, no Nigerian prince, no suspicious kind of text message, just a CAPTCHA here. And according to federal regulators and cybersecurity experts, that is exactly why this new scam is so dangerous. Criminals are disguising malware attacks as these routine sort of CAPTCHA security checks, and they're convincing us to infect our own devices. So today we are breaking down one, how this fake CAPTCHA scam works, why so many people are falling for it, and the simple red flags that can keep you from becoming the next victim. This is the In Your Corner podcast from CBS News Philadelphia. I'm your host, Josh Sidorowicz. The In Your Corner podcast is all about helping you protect your money, your identity, and your consumer rights. And today we are talking about one of the newest online threats here and how to protect yourself because it's targeting basically any one of us. It's these fake CAPTCHA scams. And by the end of this episode, what I want you to take away is that you know exactly how the scam works, the warning signs that you want to watch out for, and what to do if you think that you have actually fallen for this scam. But before we get too deep into the scam, I thought this was interesting, and I only learned this when I started researching for this episode. Did you know what CAPTCHA actually stands for? And this is totally true. Completely automated public Turing test to tell computers and humans apart. CAPTCHA. You can see why everyone just calls it CAPTCHA. But the purpose here is pretty simple, right? So we use CAPTCHA. You've got websites that use this CAPTCHA to make sure that real humans are accessing it, that it's not some automated bot that's doing it. And so that's why you might be asked to like identify and type out some distorted letters, or maybe, identify all the stop signs in a photo grid, or simply just click the box, check the box, right, saying that you're not a human. And these tests, frankly, have become so common. I'm sure you probably, I know I don't, most of us don't really think twice about them anymore, but that is exactly why scammers are latching onto this. So how does it work? Well, the Federal Trade Commission says that scammers are creating these fake CAPTCHA screens, and they look remarkably similar, surprise, surprise, to the real thing. So here's a scenario. Say you're browsing a website, suddenly the CAPTCHA pops up. And at first glance, you're looking at it, it's like, all right, this looks legitimate. But after you check the box, here's the twist. Here's the new sort of tell here that this is not what it's supposed to be. So the page will then give you this set of instructions after you've checked the box. So instead of, selecting the images, completing the puzzle, it's going to tell you to press these specific keys on your keyboard. And this is what we're typically seeing. So it says press Windows+R, then press Ctrl+V, and finally you hit enter. And first glance, I mean, that seems pretty harmless, right? But according to the FTC here, what these instructions are doing, they're basically designed to paste a hidden command into your computer and execute it. So, in other words, these scammers, they've already copied this malicious code to your clipboard. And what you're doing by following their instructions, you have unknowingly told your own computer to infect itself, to run this malware. And that's the trick here, right? I mean, that's what's so crazy. There's no sort of traditional hacking that you would think about. There's no, password guessing. There's no breaking through a security system. It is literally just simply convincing you to install this malware on your device. And that is why this is so effective. Cybersecurity researchers, they say that part of what makes this scam work so well is it's blending something familiar with something a little unusual, right? So, again, most of us have probably completed hundreds, if not thousands, of these CAPTCHAs over the years. It's basically muscle memory. You click, you verify, you move on. And that is what scammers are counting on, right? This automatic behavior. You're not stopping to give it a second thought. And when you see something as familiar as a CAPTCHA, the tendency for us is sort of to lower our guard. So these criminals, they create this sense of legitimacy, right? They're copying these designs. They look like the real thing, like maybe even Google's reCAPTCHA, or you've got these other, popular CAPTCHA verification systems. And some of these fake pages, surprise, surprise, as we've seen here, and thanks in large part to AI too, they look, they can look, and they do look nearly identical to the real deal. And because we are accustomed to following instructions during the verification process, you know, we might not immediately then recognize that we have crossed this line from, trying to prove I'm not a human to running commands on my computer. So then what happens after you've installed this malware? Well, this is where things can get really serious. So the Identity Theft Resource Center, they warn that once this malware is installed, criminals are basically giving, or you're giving criminals, they are getting full access to all of your sensitive information, all of your data. Here you go, hand it over on a silver platter.
Malicious software, like what you would download in the CAPTCHA scam, has the ability to essentially be snooping on you. So, and capturing all of that information. So, when you go to log into your bank and you enter your email or your username and your password, it now has that information. You log into your email, it now has that information. So, any of the accounts that you are logging into as you to conduct your business, now it has enough information in a lot of circumstances to pretend to be you. It's an
Okay.
info stealer that is tracking all of the keystrokes that you are making, which may not matter if you're just Googling how to grow tomatoes or watching, YouTube. But if you are logging into different accounts, it's capturing that too. So that sensitive information is being captured.
Yeah, so it's essentially you're giving these attackers a way to remotely interact with your computer. And the consequences here, I mean, they can range from, you're talking about identity theft to financial fraud to long-term compromise to any accounts that you have, personal or business, and all of it, again, all of it starting with this very simple, seemingly harmless CAPTCHA. So now that we know how this scam works, let's talk about red flags that you should know, the warning signs, the easy way to sort of spot the tell here. And I think the easiest one to remember is this, and it's that a real CAPTCHA is never going to ask you to run a command on your device. Say it again. A real CAPTCHA will never ask you to run a command on your device. That's the biggest red flag here. Now, if a CAPTCHA asks you to open the run dialog, if it asks you to paste text into your computer, if it asks you to download a file, run a program, enable special permissions, nope, nope. Like big stop sign. Don't go any further. Don't pass go and collect your $200. Legitimate CAPTCHAs, they just don't work that way. They're never going to work that way if it's a legitimate CAPTCHA. While we're at it, here's a few other warning signs. So the CAPTCHAs that appear unexpectedly on a site where it doesn't belong, that's a red flag. If the website address looks strange or unfamiliar, so you think you're going to one website, but then the address doesn't quite match that. If the verification appears inside of a pop-up window, that's another red flag. Or if the instructions seem unusually complicated for, again, what should be this kind of simple human interaction test. So, bottom line here, as with a lot of this stuff that we talk about, it's like trust your instinct. If something feels off, it probably is off. Now, if you do wind up falling for this, or if you know someone who has fallen for it, do not panic because not all hope is lost here. Let's say you already clicked through. There are actually some things that you can do to reduce the damage, at least according to experts. So the first thing experts say is you want to disconnect the device from the internet. And what that is going to do is that's going to stop the malware from communicating with the attackers or continuing to steal the information from your device. And then next, you want to run a full security virus check, right? If you've got a reputable antivirus or anti-malware software, make sure that's updated and then scan your computer. And then if the files were downloaded, you want to delete those immediately. You don't want to open them. You don't want to mess with them. You just want to delete them. And then here's a few more. Clear your browser cache and review any browser extensions. So look for anything that's maybe unfamiliar that you want to remove. And then after that, and this is really important, after that, you want to go to another device, a trusted device, a secure device, and you want to go in and change all of your important passwords, enable two-factor authentication where you can. Again, doing it from that other device that isn't impacted, but that way you can lock down and secure your accounts and they won't have those new passwords. So those are all like really good things just to know because again, there's a chance you might fall for it, or maybe you're talking to a loved one or a friend and they say they fell for it. There are things you can do to kind of, mitigate the disaster that could be on your hands. But I think it's interesting why we're seeing more of these types of scams right now because researchers say there's a couple of reasons. First, and I guess this kind of goes without saying, but it makes sense, is well, they're effective. I always say, scammers wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't paying off, right? We continue to fall for it. And a lot of people who say, well, it would never be me, and I used to kind of be of that mindset too. But I think the reality is there's so many new and kind of really just, I don't know, honestly, creative and clever ways that these scammers are trying to get at our information that unless you are like up on it, unless you are fully present there and in the right state of mind, I could see how this could happen. So they're effective, right? Scammers, they found ways to exploit these very familiar online behaviors that most of us perform without a second thought. And then, secondly, here, at least when we're talking about these kinds of scams, researchers say that launching these attacks, they become a whole lot easier. So, cyber criminals, they can now very easily access ready-made malware tools, and there's, other kind of attack kits that are out there. And so it lowers the barrier to entry for a scammer. Okay, so final takeaway here. I think if there is one thing that I want you to remember from today's episode, it is this. It is that a CAPTCHA should only verify you're human. That is it. It should not ask you to open a program. It should not ask you to paste any commands in. It shouldn't ask you to download any files. And it certainly should not ask you to run anything on your computer. So if you encounter a CAPTCHA that does any one of those things, again, close the page out immediately, be done with it. Ultimately, the few seconds it takes where you can stop and think about it really could save you from a malware infection, from stolen passwords, from emptied bank accounts, and potentially, months or years then of dealing with identity theft down the road. As always, staying informed is the best way to protect yourself. This is the In Your Corner podcast from CBS News Philadelphia. I'm Josh Sidorowicz. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.